Okay, so let's just jump right in. Let me share my screen. Okay, is that good? Is that right, Carrie? Everyone, can you see my screen? Perfect, okay. Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining me this morning. My name is Aisha Dixon, and we're here to have an interactive discussion. I will be posting this on our YouTube channel later, so feel free to check that out, and I'll put all that in the chat later on. So the UCLA Emeriti Retirees Relations Center, we have partnered with our sister campuses of UC Berkeley, UC Santa Cruz, UC Davis, Irvine, Riverside, and the University of Southern California for today's program. I'm so honored and glad to be with such high esteemed colleagues, Janet Brown from USC and Carrie Sweeney from UC Berkeley. So welcome everybody. Just a couple housekeeping. You're more than welcome to type whatever you want in the chat. We'll answer questions. I will put our YouTube channel and some other contact information in the chat later on. So just a little history about why we're here today, Older Americans Month. Each May, the Administration for Community Living leads the celebration of older Americans. This year's theme recognizes the important role older adults play in fostering connection and engagement that builds strong, resilient communities. We're so glad to be partnering with ACL today. And among us at UC, we're a community of network retiree centers. And we want to highlight our dedication to not only intergenerational programming, but to also facilitate conversations on aging-related topics. We also raise awareness of older adult services, needs, and digital connectivity, caregiving issues, and social isolation. So with that, I want to introduce our special guest, Faye Gordon, who is the Regional Administrator for Region 9 for ACL. Faye, just tell me when you want to forward on the next slide.
Awesome, great. Well, thank you so much. Can you hear me okay, Aisha? Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm going to be very brief. I just want to share a little bit about the Administration for Community Living as we are partnering to share information about Older Americans Month. And then I can't wait to get into the dialogue and the discussion today. I am the Regional Administrator for Region 9. This represents the ACL programs, which include the states of California, Nevada, Arizona, Hawaii, and the territories in the Pacific. But I'm really excited to speak to the UC group today. I'm a UCLA alumni, so I've got my shirt on and just can't wait to be a part of this conversation. On the next slide, I just want to share a little bit about ACL. You're probably very well aware of the programs and initiatives that we support, but you might not know about us as the umbrella agency supporting all of them. So ACL stands for the Administration for Community Living, and we are a division of the Federal Department of Health and Human Services. We were created 10 years ago around the fundamental principle that older adults and people with disabilities should be able to live where they choose, with the people that they want to live with, and with the ability to participate fully in their communities. And so our goal as an agency is to fund services and supports that are provided by networks of community-based organizations. And then we invest in research, education, and innovation to make sure this idea of community living and choice in where people age and how they age is a living reality for millions of Americans. So how do we do that? Briefly on the next slide, we do this by funding and supporting and administering a variety of programs. And I won't go into all of these programs. These are just a few of the programs that we support, but you may currently be working with one of these programs or volunteering with them, or have clients who work with them, and feel free to check out this list. There's a link to the full range of supports that we support to help people be able to age with choice in the community. And you can check that out. And if you have questions about any of these programs and what they're called where you live in California, because they go by a range of different names depending on where you are, I'd be happy to answer that in the chat box. So please feel free to explore that list and learn a little bit more about the work that we do. On the next slide, I just briefly want to share the 2021 priorities for ACL because I think it links up really nicely with our conversation today about communities of strength and ageism and how we can really look at equity from an aging perspective. So just a few, these are the 3 core priorities of our agency this year. The first, obviously, is COVID-19 and what has become the crisis of COVID-19 and now the recovery of COVID-19. We are working very closely with CDC to ensure that older adults have access to the vaccines. So we're funding states to help transport people to vaccination sites, also bring vaccines to people in their homes, and provide another, a full range of supports to make sure people have the information that they need to know about vaccine access. The other big component of our COVID-19 work right now is the rescue piece of it through the American Rescue Plan and through the recovery. We see this as a long-term opportunity to really invest in aging services and create the infrastructure and the networks that we need to fully support community living moving forward. So this was a $1.4 billion investment specifically for Older Americans Act programs in the plan, and the states will be administering this funding over the next 4 years. Our other major priority is equity. We're centering everything that we do in equity, looking at racial justice and the intersectionality with aging and looking at ageism and how they work together. We are trying to bring this lens to all of our programs and policies and make sure that they're all pushing everything from an equity perspective and an equity lens. So we're looking forward to that part of the conversation today. And finally, the last big component coming out of COVID-19 that we have recognized for a long time and we continue to recognize is the need to support family caregivers. We saw that so much caregiving is falling on informal supports and family members, and the agency is really looking at how to invest in that caregiving support through different programs to help family caregivers through a range of needs. So that is our 3 core priorities for 2021. And on the next slide, we're celebrating all of this month through Older Americans Month. Older Americans Month is every May, and this year our theme is communities of strength, and just really excited to be a part of this conversation and the work that you're doing. And please feel free if you ever need to contact me. My contact information is there. I'd love to chat about anything that you're thinking about that relates to aging and connect you to anyone within the region who may be helpful. And you can feel free to chat me in the chat box. Thank you so much for having me, Aisha. I'm really looking forward to this discussion. Thank you. Oh, I think you're muted. I'm not hearing you.
You're right, I was muted. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Faye. So just a little background and history about Older Americans Month, and this initiative that you'll hear a lot today is Age Friendly. So in 2018, UCLA joined the Age Friendly University. It's a global network to collaborate across academic disciplines, our many professional schools, and just to bring together staff, retirees, emeriti, and alumni. So UCLA has an expansive longevity network, and we reach many older adults through community programs and cultural activities that we offer as a department. So again, our department is the UCLA Emeriti Retirees Relations Center. We encourage all older adults to participate in the core activities of whatever university that they're associated with, especially for the UC system, and try to engage around your campus community. We also strive to increase our internal and external alliances, which is why this program came about, to encourage stewardship, multi-generational initiatives, and to promote a positive social environment for all older persons. So like many other institutions this year, we've had to turn to educational opportunities like the OSHA Lifelong Learning Institute, called OLLI, for intellectual stimulation and social interaction. We were able to not only widen our services and expand our services last year to help reach seniors who are maybe low tech and have supportive services for educational opportunities for older adults. So this kind of came about when, everything kind of shut down in the world and people couldn't go visit friends and loved ones. At UCLA, we started a program called the Telebruin, which is like an old school phone tree. We linked up our retirees to each other where they could just call or text so that people weren't feeling so isolated and alone. So our Telebruin program had about 70 seniors connected with each other. They would text, they would call just to say hello so that people who didn't have Zoom or who couldn't go online were able to reach out with other older adults and still feel like they were part of a community setting. Then we had to pivot even more, and we started recording all of our programs on Zoom so that people who couldn't make a Zoom presentation or they couldn't hear about the newest update that was going on, we created a social media channel, and now we have a Twitter account. And all of these channels just kind of became necessary to keep people updated on COVID, on vaccines, the campus being closed, a lot of the things with the political chaos and the social unrest this year. And it really was our way to stay up to date with our retirees that could know what's happening sometimes daily with things that were changing and what was closing and what was opening nearby. So it really was helpful for us to put things on YouTube and use our Twitter account. So I will put all of our social media channels in the chat at the end of the program, and I encourage you to do the same. If your community or your campus has started a social media, Twitter, Facebook, please put that in the chat and we can definitely share our resources that way. So I hope out of this program, we can increase the understanding of longevity, the complexity and richness that older adults bring to our society. And I think this past year with COVID, it really showed how vulnerable many networks are with connecting older adults and communications. So many places need more institutional support, and they have to redefine the way that we think about aging and isolation. A lot of people were so isolated this year, whether or not they're low income or they live in a rural area. It's really challenging for people who don't have either the church connection or the community congregate living connection, and a way for them to feel connected with other people in life. So our retirement centers, especially with the UC system, became a conduit of information. Many of us created a COVID-specific webpage to keep up with all the closings and reopenings, and then closings again, and then reopening again. So that way people knew about all the new developments that were happening around their campus. So today's topics. So let's dive into talking about a few of these things. So older adult services and needs. A lot of things went really well this year, I think, and some things went wrong. So a few of the things we'll talk about will be nursing homes, vaccines, food delivery, medication, food storage. And as I mentioned before, you're more than welcome to unmute yourself and hop in on a topic, but it's designed to be an interactive discussion on how we can tackle ageism and maybe take some concrete steps towards equity for all ages. Our panelists are all multidisciplinary, and we will talk about the impact on ageism in our lives and other older adults around the globe. So what I really found was interesting is, I think in the beginning of COVID, nursing homes and retiree communities, those are some of the first ones to close their doors for visitors to protect our older adults. If anyone has any input about, how they felt things went well for retirement communities. I think I saw something in the news where some women were dressing up as older adults to get their vaccine first in line. So it was just incredible for people who, have built this country and they were first in line to get their vaccines. I also have some friends who are in the food service industry, and, people were getting food delivered left and right. Everything in the world could now be delivered. It's so good for our older adults who need medications delivered or couldn't go out to the grocery store and could get stuff delivered. But then there was also a massive food shortage and toilet paper shortage. And I think a lot of those really showed, the gaps into our service delivery with everything in general, with how things have gone through this past year. So let's talk about caregiving issues. So I know that you mentioned about a lot of people having to deal with caregiver burden, mental health, the people who lived in retirement communities, you know, they couldn't visit their loved ones and friends. If people did contract COVID, they couldn't see their loved ones. So does anyone have any thoughts on this? How have you personally been impacted by caregiving issues or a loved one that you may know of? And I can stop screen sharing to open it up for a little bit for this conversation. Let me see. So has anyone have any specific issues that they have, you know, had this past year with any of their clients experiencing financial loss, or anyone that's a personal caregiver that was having challenges, you know, being able to go into different places and provide that service that people need? Someone, let me see.
Like Charlotte raised her hand.
Go ahead, yeah, Charlotte.
So I'm a social worker, and I work pretty much with the homeless population here at UC Davis. I'm an alumni of UC Davis, but in the community of Davis, we have a lot of homeless. And what we found particularly was finding housing, making sure that food insecurities were being met, and many of the homeless population are well into their 60s. At least those that I work with. There's some that are much younger, but for the most part, they're very, I would say, they're in the elderly population. And so what we found was making sure that getting services to them, including vaccines. We are still working on making sure that that population particularly is getting the vaccines. Where do they go? It's a community that's not always really accepted. The population is not always accepted in and around our own community. So that's one thing that I would like to just say is an important population to focus on, as well as we look at the older adults and older population, and not to forget those that are homeless either by choice or because of losing jobs, homes, etc. The other is having relatives and friends in care facilities and not being able to visit. That's tough, because that connection for that population who are housed in care facilities, they need contact, they need people contact. And so in my case, I have a brother who's aging, who actually got COVID in the facility, actually recovered, which is good. But also we couldn't see him, and he was placed in part of the building where even a window didn't have access to him. So those were the challenges that I particularly have been involved with in this last year. And then on a personal note, as an part of the aging population, which I embrace, it was hard not to see friends and meet up for coffee and have the chats and so forth. So I got very involved with Ollie, actually at UC Davis, and being able to have Zoom classes and meet up that way was a real positive way to be able to stay connected, particularly in the first few months of the COVID quarantine restrictions. So I just wanted to share that, because I think that we need to think about the aging population, not just being in care facilities, but who are in the homeless population, how are they affected, the personal side of all of this quarantine and the care. And then on our own personal, I joined today because I like the title. I was not even aware there was a aging or adult or American month. I had no idea this was a thing. So now I do. So I find that just interesting that we have a month to celebrate. I'd like to believe we're celebrating every day, all year long. So thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. That's wonderful. And I know you mentioned Ollie, and I would like to see if Anusha, are you there? Do you want to talk a little bit about Osher and kind of how you guys have incorporated lifelong learning this year? I'm sure you've had a lot more people interested in learning things since we're all at home and can like always learn another thing.
Definitely. Thank you, Aisha. And I got excited when Charlotte mentioned Osher and Ollie. I was like, she needs to be taking the UCLA classes too. So we have 124 Oshers actually or Ollies across the nation. So one at UCLA, one at UC Davis, and a few others in the UC network. We actually found a lot of positives coming out of the transition to remote learning, only because we had been trying to get more students comfortable with the website, registering online, even before Zoom was a thing. And so there was a lot of hesitancy, of course, towards that. But when Zoom happened, people were ready to start taking classes because of the timing of the pandemic. We had a few weeks between the first lockdown and the start of the spring quarter. So even within those few weeks, people were restless, and those who had said they wouldn't take Zoom and were going to wait it out were ready to start learning. So there was definitely a lot of work on the personnel side to get that transition supported. But the positive has been increased confidence in technology use that has grown, quarter by quarter. So there were some students who would even feel uncomfortable last summer, but after doing it a few times are getting better. We've been able to reach a lot more people too. So one of the complaints we used to get was that it was hard to get to class. Walking from parking to the building was a challenge for some people. We're located in Westwood to kind of make things easier than going on campus at UCLA, but even so, there was struggle. So we've been reaching a lot more people. I pulled some data on our map of zip codes that we're reaching, and it is all over California now and across the country, some as well, on the East Coast especially. We have some people even from out of the country, which is nice. But that has also allowed for connections to be made among the members of the program that wouldn't have been possible before. So we get a lot of feedback from people in class telling us, oh, it was so interesting to get a perspective from someone in Oklahoma on this, or someone in Canada or anywhere else that's not LA. So it's been positive. We don't get involved as much with nursing homes and things like that and retirement communities, but I would, encourage those of you who are familiar with them to encourage those people who are feeling, up to it and capable of going on the computer to engage in these kind of courses, because we do think that it's been a big tool in supporting our folks. Those who, Aisha mentioned, people who live in rural communities are feeling the lack of social connection a little bit more than those in Los Angeles, perhaps. But even so, we're gonna go forward now having a full Zoom program, regardless of when we go back to the classroom. We'll have both, just because of the people with disabilities or the people with other access issues who have not been able to take our classes in the past. We have a large population of those now that we're going to continue to serve.
Great, that's fantastic. Does anyone have any other questions about Ollie or kind of how you can find it in your community? Or Charlotte, go ahead.
I would just like to say that Ollie really did bring the community together. I'm a facilitator for a couple of classes, and I make it a point every single week before the class begins, or reminding everyone that's in the list that, just a friendly reminder, please attend the class. And I've gotten lots of feedback on that people really like being reminded week to week, particularly those that are in retirement centers or maybe have difficulty getting out and about, but they can, access with their smartphones. So that's been a really, in my opinion, a really good plus for our group. And our group in classes generally have at least, the highest we've had is 30 in just a conversation, 2-hour conversation class, and the lowest number is maybe about 18. But the point is that having that connection, and I like somebody mentioned earlier where they had a list where they match, or people were able to call each other and converse and just check in with one another. In some ways, that's kind of what we were doing, but I like the idea to make that a practice where people have a list of names that they can call at whatever time they want to, or become friends. Ollie's great. I'm a huge promoter of Ollie, so I like that idea. So thank you.
Yeah, it was really a pivot that kind of came out of necessity. We had people who were, had Zoom or they have their smartphone, but we had quite a bit of people who just didn't own anything, no computer, and we didn't want to lose our connection with those retirees. So the Telebruin program, we gave guidelines about people about not talking politics, cultural, religion. It's strictly just, hi, I'm a friend. I retired from this department. You know, how have you been feeling this past few weeks in lockdown? And we wanted to make sure that people felt comfortable and safe. We gave these guidelines, no disclosing financial information. We don't want anyone to kind of cross any lines with any personal information that they were giving out. Any other comments? I think I saw a couple of questions coming into the chat about Ollie. So I think we can have somebody go in there and answer the Ollie questions for you. So yeah, so to bring it back to caregiving issues, you know, I think this past year I was really saddened and just upset to see our frontline workers with not having the adequate supplies of wearing trash bags and gloves and reusing their masks. It really just was hard to see. And myself, I've been a caregiver for many years, and it's challenging. It's got to be very sad to see these people facing this disease and not having the adequate care to take care of their clients and their patients. I saw a hand go up. Where'd it go? Is it Anne? Did I see you?
So that's Deanne.
Deanne. Okay.
Deanne.
Go ahead. Hi.
Good morning, everybody. So I work at UCLA through a couple of programs, but one that I'm going to talk about is a program called Generation Exchange. And Generation Exchange is part of the geriatrics department there at UCLA. And we have, I work with over 55 volunteers that we put in 6 LA Unified School District schools, grades K through 3rd grade. So for 7 years, they've been used to going into the classrooms and having, you know, one-on-one with the kids and all that. So when COVID hit, we had to figure out, so how do we switch these volunteers that some of them still have flip phones, and how do we get them to think about how do we still reach the kids, because the kids still need to work and now they're on Zoom, but how do we get these volunteers that are 50 and over to adjust to a whole different lifestyle? So it was a challenge, but we made it. Our volunteers are now Zooming. Now they're able to Zoom with their families across the state, which they were never able to do that. We provided Chromebooks for those that didn't have tablets or iPads or something. But what we learned from that, it took away some of the depression that might have set in if we would allow them for a year and a half not to do anything. So now they're actually in the classroom with the students via Zoom. And because they kept saying, well, the students not going to know, I don't understand. So it was a learning experience for our volunteers, but my God, they all came through and they're Zooming and setting up all kind of separate chats and all that. But one of the things that we did in the beginning too, while we were going through the training process, they came up, we had them to kind of think out the box, come up with ideas of things that you guys can do every week for yourself. So they came up with movie clubs. So one of them, each school has about 10 volunteers at each school. So some of them were doing movie clubs. So they would pick a movie and then they had a week to watch it. And then when they would meet, because we meet every week for an hour to discuss what has happened during that week. And that's at every school with all the volunteers. So they would look at a movie, then they come back and they would discuss different parts. Some of them, they were assigned, they started different book clubs. So because these are things they used to do in person, they used to do Zoom in class, they used to do, movie nights and brunches and lunches and happy hours. So now they can't do that stuff anymore. So a lot of our volunteers do not have kids, and so, or the kids are grown, nobody's in the home. So we want to make sure, we know that mental health thing will slip in if people are just idle. So by keeping them attached to the kids, and now they're really excited about how the kids are still responding, because they can still give the kids that one-on-one, because they go in breakout rooms and they do one-on-one. And we work around, we do reading and math. are most of the things that we do to assist the teachers in the classroom. So it has been really a successful thing, unbeknown how we didn't know how it was going to do, but we just continue. But we want to make sure that we continue the work that we were doing. But we did have to flip it and put everybody on Zoom and just give them the skills that they needed to process. You know, we had some that just could not catch on to Zoom and say, you know, I'll wait till the fall of this September and come back when we're actually in person. And since some of the schools are back doing half days in and half days out, I think I have maybe 5 volunteers that actually are on the campus right now because they just could not wait to September. They're like, I'm going back now. So we have about 5 that are actually going in to their classroom with their teachers. But that's kind of how we overcame that, making sure that our seniors were able to continue the work that they did and make sure we gave them the tools to work with.
That's wonderful. And I put your information about Gen X in the chat. You can add more information. I'm not quite sure if that's the correct website. I think it is. But you brought a great topic to lead us to our next topic. So let me get back to where we were. Okay, so this kind of just segued right into social isolation. And I think a lot of the things that we dealt with were people feeling lonely and not having that connection. We started doing a program about mental health care and counseling for older adults and meditation. I know there's been a huge, I think the only business that did really well last year was the wine industry and the beer industry because everyone was home and ordering lots of alcohol. So, but you know, that there's a fine line between people who are now home more often, substance abuse. I think domestic violence went up quite a bit and spiked in not only older adults, but also children. And either the divorce rate went really, really high, or people just, you know, dealt with their isolation, or people found more love. And it was definitely a different dynamic for everyone over the past year. And a lot of those normal places where people do congregate, museums, parks, churches, they were all closed down. And it was really difficult to even know what to do and where to go, especially for us in Los Angeles. You know, the beach is like a mecca, and they closed the beaches all summer. And, you know, it was really difficult to try to find that haven that's outside. They tell you to be outside and not be indoors, but there was really no parks to go to. There was caution tape around every single thing. I have a 5.5-year-old, and, you know, trying to get her to be around other friends, and we couldn't go to a park. So we'd had so many Zoom play dates. But I'm curious if anyone has had clients or loved ones who may have been disproportionately amplified by being socially isolated, if it came up through either their isolation from being loneliness or even enhanced distancing because of COVID measures. Has anyone had a particular situation about someone close to them that they were not able to be more in touch with?
I have an example. My mother-in-law, is it okay if I talk? Sorry, I didn't.
No, go ahead. Seriously, good talk.
My mother-in-law, you know, didn't go to the doctor all year. And in January, she was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer for a cough that we kept saying, I think you need to go to the doctor, you know, via our Zoom meetings. You don't sound too good. And she kept saying, oh no, it's just a cough. Well, she has stage 4 cancer, and I don't know if it would have been discovered had she gone, but she didn't go. So that's tough.
Yeah, definitely. I had my dentist appointment, I think March 13th, and I was at the dentist's office, and you know, you're all exposed, your mouth is wide open, and it was just very terrifying. And I had postponed every other appointment, but it's really scary. I know a lot of people who haven't seen a physician in at least over a year. So how do we, you know, get people more comfortable now going back into those locations where You know, you're in a doctor's office, someone there is sick with something, or they might be sick with something. How do we get back to normalcy and feel okay to be in these places that are in public? It's kind of shocking. I know California is opening completely. It feels like it's opening too fast. Do we have anyone from outside of California here that can share what's happening in their zip code? Or I know there's things different in NorCal versus SoCal, and even Orange County is a bit different than LA County. But I'm curious, has anyone else experienced anything more with not being able to have the mental health concerns or seeing your physician? And have they started seeing a therapist in the past year because of all of this? I think it just really highlighted the need for mental health services, and not even thinking of just older adults, but just, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of mass shootings, but you know, a lot of that people talk about the mental health of generations, and not just older adults. But I think after this year, there's going to be a bigger push for people to have better mental health and better work-life situations, because we definitely need a break. I sometimes joke that we're not working from home, we're living at work, and we're all kind of in this 24/7 bubble of meetings and doing all kind of things from our living room or bedrooms. And you need a chance to like slow down and take a break. So hopefully you can find some local counseling resources near you. Did I see someone's hand go up? I thought I.
Oh, yeah. Can I share one thought?
Sure.
The isolation. I think that one thing that this really highlighted for so many of us in our families was how much we've taken for granted aspects of our families, and how profound the connection is between grandparents and grandchildren. And when that, I know, at least for me personally, the inability of my parents to see my son, and the sort of seeing that as a dangerous thing if they were to be together in person, and creating almost like a fear element around that was very difficult for both, I think, their mental health and then also for his development. And now that we're in this, you know, post-vaccine world, which is great, and we're seeing these reunions between grandparents and grandchildren, it's beautiful. But I don't know if we've fully grieved what a year apart has meant and what that means for the development of both. And I think that's a relationship that our society has maybe taken for granted for a long time, what the relationship does for the older adult and what it does for the child and how profound it is. And I'm hoping that what we can get out of this is a deeper respect for that relationship and ways that we can help support those grandparent-grandchildren connections, because I think we've found how valuable they are for both, and how challenging it is when they're not able to be together. So that hits me personally.
And I'll build on that today. This is Carrie. I thought very, very well said. There is much that was taken for granted during this time, but we can take a lot away from that. So even to say, as you said, how important family, grandchildren, how important our family caregivers are, as we all know, the level of support that they provide, and hopefully we'll be getting some relief in the additional monies coming down from the feds. At least the formal caregivers, and potentially informal caregivers. But what we are able to see is a year of what happens when your caregiver is not able to show up at a nursing home and be there as an advocate for a person. And if we can take away anything from this, I think it would be to recognize the strength of what a caregiver provides, not only the help and support, but the loneliness and the anxiety that comes from not being around that person when you're in with some of the draconian rules that were put on nursing homes really did drive home how important it is to have that connection. And I think if we don't want, a lot of us don't want things to go back to normal in a lot of ways. And I think this is one way that we can, and I'll put in a plug for CANNER, which is the California, let me make sure I always, nursing home, the California Advocates for Nursing Home Reform, who are at the front lines of changing and impacting policy reform for nursing homes. Having caregivers be essential to a person is something that we could really, really fight for when and if anything ever like this happens again. But at the very most, allowing that access to their caregiver and their families, the visits. I think we can tell this last year's really made a big impact on them.
Absolutely. I do want to address one of the questions in the chat from Patrick. So could you elaborate a little bit more on linking retirees with concerns of communities? So I think I know what you're asking, but I just want to kind of see if I'm going down the right path there. Patrick, you still there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I was just wondering, there's a lot of talent and concern and knowledge within the academic community of retirees. And so I was just curious if any of the institutions represented here have developed specific initiatives during this time to address the concerns and needs of community dwelling older adults, and like the issues of social isolation. And I got one response from Jeanette talking about some activity that they did at USC with the students, trying to reach out and stay connected to their retirees, but a real concern in terms of those retirees who are not technologically connected, don't have computers, don't have smartphones, and just worried about how are we reaching those people who may be most suffering during the COVID time. So I was just curious as to if there are other initiatives that people could speak to about how academic retirees have been linked to community dwelling of older adults and their concerns and needs.
Well, Jeanette could speak to it, but at USC, I'm from USC's Leonard Davis School of Gerontology. USC gerontology students, as well as I think volunteers through the Emeriti Center and the Keck School of Medicine, all just did a phone tree, like was mentioned at UCLA. So a phone tree doesn't require the smartphone, and so that was one way that was basically the base way we connected, and it was helpful, but having that kind of thing going forward. And that's something that we did back 30 years ago when I worked, in a senior center, just calling for telecheck every day.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Just a basic thing, but we shouldn't give it up. Actually, in my neighborhood, our HOA knew that a number of older adults aren't connected. And so we printed up flyers and I delivered them to, however many homes, slid them under their door, talked to some people, and just tried to get the word out on a piece of paper as well, which 99% of the neighbors probably thought was a waste of paper, but it did reach some people. So it's tough.
That's great. Yeah, telephone reassurance is like one of those old programs. Everything old is new again, and really got highlighted here during this particular period. Yeah, right. So, Jeanette, you were sharing some things. Do you want to talk more about those? Those things you're sharing on chat. I like what you're saying in chat.
Well, for those of you that don't know, the Emeriti Center is run mostly by undergraduate students at USC, and they really care about older adults. So we did very similar things to UCLA and also Berkeley. And one of the things that's wonderful is these UC universities and the University of Southern California and some other institutions, we connect with one another and share best practices and good ideas. So it's been exciting. But the students, the pharmacy students who've been giving consultations on Medicare D with our retirees, they wanted to do more. So they handmade these wonderful little notes and sent them off to our widows and widowers who were living alone at USC. And then surprisingly, when we did our phone connections, Trojan Connections calling program, we had well over 50% of students that wanted to call and connect. And actually, some of them were international students that were lonely and they wanted to talk to someone. So this intergenerational connection
has been wonderful. And our Zoom sessions, our students were teaching the retirees how to do Zoom. And they then would call them on the phone and help them out along with our information technology folks. So a lot of people came together to do a lot of wonderful things. The problem is the retirees that didn't know, if they didn't call us, we couldn't call them back. And we did send one mail out, but that's expensive. So we wanted them to know we care, but you know, it's really hard if you're not doing a phone call or mailing out the old-fashioned mail out.
Mary, you have your hand up.
Yeah, hi. My name's Mary, and I'm a retired family nurse practitioner with UCLA, specifically at Venice Family Clinic. And I volunteer once a week as a driver for Meals on Wheels West once the pandemic started. And we deliver hot food and other food to seniors. So we identified, I believe this is with Santa Monica West, Meals on Wheels. And I believe we have about 500 seniors, and we identified about 46 that were shut-ins and no family, no contact, but had been keeping their own apartment and what have you. So the whole issue of trying to vaccinate them, we coordinated with all the rest of them, picking them up, getting them to pop-ups, vaccination clinics at St. John's and with UCLA, et cetera. So I was asked by the director, you know, what can we do? And I said, well, we got to bring the clinicians to the shut-ins. So we first talked about Santa Monica paramedics coming to make arrangements, come to their home. They can, you know, do the iPad, get the history, give the immunization, and then monitor them for 15 minutes. And if they do have a reaction, they're qualified and licensed to give the EpiPen and what have you, or transport them. So it was kind of slow walking with the Santa Monica people. So we ended up, because I have my affiliation with Venice Family Clinic, we have a mobile homeless van that's fully equipped to do any type of exam. It's like a mobile MASH unit. And so we were able to get that staff, which is a physician assistant and or a doctor and a medical assistant, to go out and individually immunize those seniors. So I feel very pleased about that campaign and getting that accomplished. But you really have to think differently and be creative in terms of getting services to people that are shut in. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. So that kind of pivoted on to our next, I thought we already touched on a bit of these topics here about our digital connectivity and how people couldn't respond to our technology and just reaching things and making appointments for a vaccine. How do you make an appointment if it's buffering or they're full every 5 minutes online? Let me see if I can make sure I have the right display settings. Oh, wrong one. Okay. So we already touched on this a little bit, but yes, it's very difficult for people to, you know, try to go online and make a vaccine appointment if they don't have a smartphone or a QR code or, you know, they don't have broadband internet. So we definitely saw a lot of these things throughout this past year. But I was glad to see, I think Verizon or T-Mobile started offering free internet for people, and you could borrow a hotspot from some libraries and some local schools. And I just realized I forgot one of the biggest Zoom faux pas and had no one introduce themselves. So I'll definitely leave some time for that as we move on to kind of like our final topic, and we can discuss all the topics with social isolation, caregiving, and everything. And then I do want to have some time for people, albeit at the end, to introduce themselves, because I completely forgot about who we are and what we do and how we are kind of connected in this bubble of older adults. So this is kind of a fun, interesting topic that doesn't get brought up a lot, but ageism in the media. So when you think of older adults on TV, you don't often see them as in a leading role. I think most adults are portrayed as feeble, they're absent-minded, they don't spotlight the older average experience of people in their 60s and plus. And this really piqued my interest because, as I mentioned, I think before the Zoom started, a friend of mine was working on Nomadland, and it got so much attention in the media because you have this older woman who's the lead character. She just gives up. I don't want to be a spoiler alert, but it's focused on this older woman, and she's, playing her own age in the movie. And you've seen sort of a rise in older adults having these leading roles, which never really happened in years. I think prior to the past few years, the last time you saw older people in a leading role was Golden Girls. And that was years ago. But now you have things like Schitt's Creek, which is Catherine O'Hara, I believe, and is a lead role there. And then Frankie and Grace have two older women who are the center of this movie. So has anyone had any sort of, if you're in the industry or you're familiar with seeing, different movies, of how film historians have seen older adults who are allowed to look their age on television? They don't have a lot of makeup that makes them look younger. Does anyone have any feedback or any experience with what you're seeing on TV nowadays versus, say, 5-10 years ago, of seeing older representation in film and TV?
Well, I'm not in the industry, but I think it's a very interesting topic that you bring up, because I know that 60 now is such a different experience than it might have been in being 60 in the 80s or 90s. So, medical care has changed, people's life expectancy has gotten longer, and 60 now is so different than it was then. So I think I've thought about this a lot, Aisha, and I think that the entertainment industry, probably all industries, are driven by where money can be made. And I think people are starting to realize that there is a large audience of older adults who are still active and interested in being engaged in all sorts of different things. So I think that that's changing. I would be curious if anyone here knows more about efforts that are going on to change that. I did watch Frankie and Grace over winter break, so I'm getting on board with that too.
Well, I know, so my time at USC, I know the Annenberg School, they were having some program called the Silvering of Hollywood or something like that. I think Caroline mentioned something in the chat about the research that's going on now. So can you share a little bit more about what's happening with Silvering of Hollywood?
Well, yeah, just check out the Annenberg, I don't want to get the name wrong, Annenberg Initiative, Inclusion Initiative. So they've been studying not only older adults, but intersectional issues. How is race, ethnicity, gender portrayed in the media? She has a whole group of research assistant students who watch movies, and tabulate. So she'll tell you in their reports, 44% of older adults get murdered in TV, or they die of unnatural causes, which is not reality. Anyway, so check out their work, and she speaks out a lot in the public media, but not only having to do with older adults, many issues. So it's really important, and there has been progress, and there have been more and more aging characters, and recent movies, besides Nomadland, but Minari stars an intergenerational story, wonderful story. And of course, The Father, for which Anthony Hopkins won an Oscar, and he wasn't even online that day. Anyway, there are many examples, and there is change, but there's still a long way to go with portrayals and things like that. So,
Thank you. Yes, Charlotte, you have your hand up.
I do. So two things. One is I really enjoy PBS Judy Woodruff because she is about my age. And I like the fact that there's still that focus that an older woman, particularly, not the older, there's many older men who are still giving us news at the end of the day. But I'm really glad that PBS does that. The other is on Facebook, just recently, there has a group of women and men have started something called the Gray Haired group. And that is being proud of having gray hair, because for so long it was, dye your hair, don't look old, make sure those grays are not showing in your, the part or whatever one may have. And so embracing age with the growing change of skin and hair and so forth, I think we're seeing more of that. Grace and Frankie certainly give a humorous way of approaching aging, and I'm glad that we're seeing that as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we are kind of close to an hour, but I don't want anyone to go away without at least introducing ourselves. And I feel awful for that's like Zoom 101. And here I am forgetting for people to introduce themselves. So I would like for the other moderators to introduce themselves. So Jeanette, can you please introduce yourself, and Carrie follow after Jeanette, please, so we can just at least say hello to everybody that I didn't get a chance to introduce earlier.
Not a problem. I'm so excited for being invited and participating. I run the USC Emeriti Center at the University of Southern California, and we're very multi-generational. As I said, our students run the center, and we focus on multi-generational, multidisciplinary, multicultural programming. Caroline Cicero, is a professor in the School of Gerontology, and she had to go to an appointment, so she apologizes for leaving.
Thank you. Carrie?
Hi, I'm Carrie Sweeney. I direct the UC Berkeley Retirement Center, and I want to thank Aisha for pulling this together, and go gerontologists. That's what Aisha and I do. We both studied what the aspects around aging, the social aspects around aging. And these are the things we think about all day and night. So it's fun to talk about them with people. Thank you.
I told my friends I'm gonna nerd out in gerontology today. So it really was exciting for me, because people don't really know what gerontology is, but this is kind of it. This is what we dig our nails in and get excited. I thank you, Carrie, for joining from the East Coast. So I'm really happy that you can make it here. So I don't know if we have time to have everyone do introductions, but if you want to just say hello and tell us where you're at and what you do, put your information in the contact. We can have maybe like a 30-second round robin. Do you want to start, Kathy? You're at the top of my screen. Kathy Blondell?
I can't right now. My dog's howling at the clock.
Okay. No worries. We've heard from Charlotte. Thank you for having such an amazing background with everything that you do. Nancy Hayes, do you want to say hello?
Hi, Aisha. I'm Nancy, and a retiree from UCLA Health, where I'd been for almost 30 years in care coordination and clinical social work. And I was so grateful that during the pandemic, I was able to volunteer to support UCLA Health and the COVID-19 wellness and emotional support program for staff, so that I could be embedded in nursing units or with different departments, just to provide general support by phone, by Zoom meetings with units and any staff one-to-one. So as a retiree who had a callback and then finished that, and then the pandemic hit, and all my plans for retirement were very disrupted, but I needed to serve. And So I was very grateful.
Thank you so much, Nancy. That means so much. I also want to see, Rusty, are you still there? Rusty is with us from the Equity, Diversion, and Inclusion. So can you just tell us more? This is kind of a new, it's not a new department at UCLA, but I feel like after this past year, it's been more robust. Everything is more about equity and inclusion and diversity. So can you tell us briefly more about you and your role?
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you so much, Aisha, for organizing this and for kindly letting me join. Yes, as very nicely said, the Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion is about 5 years old at UCLA. I think certainly over the course of the last year, just in general, our footprint has increased, and that's very much the goal and the plan as we hope to get more initiatives and get more messaging out there. In particular, I am the Events and External Affairs Manager for EDI, and mainly in charge of programming and building collaborations with other units. And I am here on behalf of VC Spain Bradley, and I'm who's the leader of our team, and I'm very happy to relay all the great things that we've learned and discussed today to her. So she's in the loop.
Great, thank you so much. So let's see, again, this is our inaugural program, so I wasn't quite sure if you needed an hour or a little bit more, but I think if everyone's open, I would love to have this be like an annual program, so that we can kind of get the ball rolling and celebrate May as Older Americans Month and kind of do more things like this, because, you know, the baby boomers are it's a huge generation. And I feel with not only older students, older staff, older faculty, there really needs to be more cohesive, age-friendly talks when it comes to the university and how we can do things. If anyone else wants to open up their mic and say and introduce themselves, you're more than welcome to. I want to respect your time to kind of end around an hour, but I'm curious if anyone else wants to just tell us where you're from, what campus you're affiliated with, or just say hello, please do. But if you have to leave, go ahead. Yeah, Wendy, hi. I was gonna actually call on you, Wendy, so that's great.
Okay, so I'm a retired choreographer from Riverside, now living in the Bay Area, and I'm glad to find out some of the contacts and possibilities. I just wanted to say on a positive note that in my experiences, which sometimes have been pretty difficult, the way an older woman is treated. For example, when I had canes before my hip replacement and I was on BART holding on, and no one would give me a seat, just nobody, when I really needed it. Don't now, people, thank you. But I just was struck that actually I said no, and that's not exactly true. It would be sometimes another older woman, or it would be a young man of color. And my other experience I just want to share was when we had the Indigenous Dance Festival at UC Riverside. People came running around room to room to find me because no one could eat because I was the oldest person and I had to be served first. I think when we talk about inclusivity and diversity, there's a kind of patronizing way to imagine that these people need to be brought into some kind of mainstream, but the mainstream is pretty brutal when it comes to how we treat our elders. And I think also I have exposure through the Fulbright to my time in Malaysia. Man, it's great to be in a culture where cultures really honor elders. And I think part of the diversity, just to tag team onto you, Rusty, part of the diversity and inclusion is, can we please acknowledge that we have something to learn from our indigenous peoples and other cultures that are so much a part of this country, but not properly heard and honored. Just wanted to say that.
All I want to say is right on for what you said. That was amazing. I'll do like a little celebration icon. That was very well spoken and very well said, Wendy. Thank you so much for saying that. Any other final parting words? This has been really fun. I thank you all for making my first real program with age-friendly and older Americans. I think it was really great to have Faye here talking about ACL. I think hopefully you can take back some things to your colleagues on the aging spectrum. You know, we all deal with older adults in various parts of our lives. I think it takes a real special person to go out of their way to do the Meals on Wheels or to engage with your neighbor who needs something delivered or picked up. And I think the kindness of our community and our lives of taking care of an older relative or neighbor was really something that came out that was positive last year. So many people realized that their loved ones, you know, we all are social humans. We all need that social engagement. And it's really difficult with when you're told to stay 6 feet away and not touch people. But the world's opening back up. People are trickling and getting their vaccines. So hopefully this time next year, we're talking about where we can go and have this meeting in person, or how we can hug each other and be kind of safe. Any other final words? I do want to thank also my colleagues, Eric and Maria, for joining today. Just a shout out to our department. I loved having the other UCs involved. I know Kyle was here from UC Davis, Christy from Santa Cruz, Christina from Riverside. So I really wanted to have the whole state represented. Some of our colleagues are part-time or they have other pressing issues from the other UCs, but next year we'll get all 10 campuses involved and try to make this more of a California university-wide thing. So I would love to share this with Cal States and other universities and kind of get this on everyone's radar, because I heard many people say that they didn't know this month existed. So now you know, and next year will be bigger and better. Hopefully you can take away some ideas to your colleagues and other campuses. I don't want to keep rambling, but any other final words besides myself?
Thank you.
You're welcome. So have a great long weekend. It's Thursday, so take care, everyone. I will be in touch. You have my email address. Thank you so much for taking time out of your morning, and have a great Thursday. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, Aisha. Well done. Woohoo.
Thank you.